G'day and welcome to Inside Rugby with Mark. My name is Mark. I'm a Kiwi rugby fan who's living here in beautiful Cancun in Mexico. And in this video I'm going to review the game that took place in the weekend between the Lions and Munster. It was played in Johannesburg and the URC Championship competition. Okay, let's get on with the video and get into it. Hey, welcome everyone to the channel. If you're here for the first time, welcome. It's great to have you here. I make videos about rugby stuff that's going on all around the world, so if that's something that you enjoy and you like the way that I present my content, why not hit the subscribe button and support this. And if you like my content, don't forget to give it one of these fellas and help me along the journey as well. Okay, so the Lions against Munster in Johannesburg, a difficult task for Munster to come to this ground. Don't forget, Johannesburg is over 1,700 meters above sea level. That means it's around about 5,000 feet, and it's pretty difficult to play 80 minutes of rugby in those conditions. So it needs to be a smart, intelligent team that comes to play the Lions in Johannesburg, and that's exactly what we saw with Munster in this game. And it was pretty exciting from that perspective, I thought, because they came with a real strategy in this game. Now the Lions of course had that great win against Leinster the week before, so they were looking to back that up, and I think a lot of the spectators that went along to the Emirates Stadium in Johannesburg on the weekend were looking forward to that open play and style from the Lions because they did it so well against Leinster the week before. But this was a different team. The Munster team is a tough team. Of course, they're previous champions of this competition, and they were coming to have their second win in their South African tour this weekend against the Lions if they were able to pull it off. Now it was very interesting to me how this game started off, because Conor Murray decided to put in box kick after box kick, and it was obvious that Munster did not want to play an expansive game of rugby to start off this game anyway. They were very much on keeping it tight, keeping it in the forwards and keeping territory in their favour. So there was those box kicks that were put up by Murray, and the Lions were able just to return those to the gain line, and that was about it. And that went on for the first few minutes of play. So I thought the strategy that Munster brought to this game was a very interesting one. They didn't want to run out of energy, so they were starting off by using that game management style that was going to be what I thought very effective. And in the first 10 minutes of the game, it was all Munster in terms of point scoring anyway. There was two penalties kicked by Jack Crowley, one in the 3rd minute, the next in the 8th minute, and they really came on the back of sustained pressure from Munster when it came to just repelling the Lions' attacking raids. And it was funny because the Lions were getting all the ball in that first 10 minutes and Munster were doing absolutely no rugby at all. Whenever they got the ball, they'd put up a kick, they'd chase it, and then they would pin down the Lions team with their good solid defence. And boy, their defence started off very, very well in this game. So 6-0 after 10 minutes in the game to Munster, despite the Lions having the majority share of possession and also territory. It was a bit of a unique situation. And this basically carried on until the 20th minute of the first half. It was all the Lions. They were having a lot of ball, they were running it at Munster, but Munster were focusing on their exits and they were focusing on territory and making sure they were staying in that period, in that point of territory between their 22 and the 22 of the Lions, and it was working very effectively. So in the first 20 minutes of the game, I thought the Munster team played absolutely fantastic, intelligent rugby. It was more like test match rugby. The two sides were testing each other out, but it was the Lions that were trying to play an expansive game. Munster weren't falling into that trap, so they kept it very close, and they used their brilliant defense that the forwards were setting up to make sure the Lions weren't able to get over the gain line. We saw a lot of phases of play from the Lions when they went from one side to the field to the other, and they just weren't penetrating through the Munster defence. So the 20th minute mark came and went in this game. 9-0 it was to Munster at this stage, and quite against the run of play, I thought. Again, I thought the Lions were having the most of the ball, but it just seemed they couldn't do anything with it. They finally got down into the Munster territory and put a bit more pressure on, and finally ended up with a penalty opportunity, which Hendricks got over for the Lions, and the score was back to 9 points to 3. I think Munster would have been pretty happy with that outcome at that stage of the game, because they didn't have a lot of the ball, yet they kept the scoreboard ticking over. And then between the 20-minute and the 30-minute mark in this game, we saw Munster playing a little bit more rugby. They were putting a bit more pressure on. Their forward domination was allowing them to get deeper and deeper into Lions territory. And I thought it was only a matter of time before Munster were going to put the pressure on and get right down and score some serious points in the Lions 22, and that's exactly what happened. They got deep into the territory. They had an attacking line-out opportunity. They turned that into a maul, pick and go a couple of times, and then that man Jack O'Donoghue got the ball for Munster and went over for the first try of the game, and the first try for Munster in this particular game. And it just went to show how good this Munster team really is, because without playing too much rugby, with the conversion of that try to Jack O'Donoghue by Crowley, the Munster team had skipped out to 16 points to 3, and we were almost at half time. It was a little bit of a funny interest in this game from that perspective. Munster weren't having to do too much to stay on top of the Lions. The Lions were trying to do what they did against Leinster last weekend, but it just wasn't working. Their execution wasn't there this weekend. We saw a number of drop passes, we saw a number of passes going behind the player, and we saw a number of opportunities where they just couldn't get through the Munster defence despite putting 10, 11, 12 phases of play together. So the Munster defence was huge in that first 35 minutes of this game, but the key to the game was Munster were able to keep the scoreboard ticking over. In the 36th minute, the Lions had one of their best opportunities of the first half to score a try. Hendricksy got into the open spaces and was taking off towards the line, but Jack Crowley did a fantastic covering tackle and definitely saved a try on that situation. So not only was Munster's go forward working in this game, their defence was absolutely fantastic as well. Well, Hendricksy was stopped from scoring a potential try on that occasion, but just 2 minutes later, in the 38th minute of the first half, he got a penalty opportunity to kick some points for the Lions, and he did that. So the score was back to 16 points to 6 with a few minutes to go before half time. And then we ran a little bit into overtime in the first half, and in the 42nd minute, Munster went on to the attack. Zebo got himself into some space. He kicked the ball ahead. It looked like he was going to regather, but he was taken out by Marius Lowe, and it ended up being a penalty try in favour of the Munster team at that stage, after some TMO interjection and discussions with the referee and the line officials. It was deemed to be that Zebo was going to score a try from fullback for Munster. He wasn't able to complete that move, and therefore Marius Lowe was sent off for 10 minutes in the sin bin. 10 penalty try ensued for Munster, and they skipped out to 23 points to 6 at half time. It was a very clever first half of rugby by Munster. They came to play the conditions, they came to play at altitude, and they know what they needed to do to save energy and to keep the Lions on the back foot. So the focus in that first half from Munster was their defence, and it worked very, very well across the pitch. All the players stood out for me. There was some really good defensive work. I thought Jack Crowley was having a good game, not only with his boot, but he was also very smart in terms of his distribution and also his position in defence. As I said, he saved that potential try from Hendricksy, but he also popped up in other phases of play that the Lions were throwing at Munster and cut them off with some good defensive work. The Munster forwards were doing a very, very good job on the Lions. They were tough in the scrums, and they were causing chaos in the lineouts as well, stealing a number of balls off the Lions in the lineouts. So at half time, I think the Munster crew would have been very happy with the way this game was going. Even if they came out in the second half and put their pedal on the metal for a while, they already had a substantial lead at half time. The Lions were unfortunate. They were trying to play the game of rugby they played against Leinster that came off last weekend. It wasn't working against this Munster team, and two reasons for that. The pressure of the defence was too much for the Lions, and if you watched how deep they had to stand on every attacking phase, Munster were up in their face, putting pressure on them by the time they were even getting to the gain line. So it was fantastic defence from Munster. And the Lions' execution, as I said earlier in the video, they just weren't able to manage that clinical precision that they had last week against Leinster. It wasn't there in this particular game in the first half. So the second half got underway, and within 8 minutes of the second half it was Munster going in for another try. Incredibly good try, this time to Daly, who went over for Munster after a number of phases put together by them, and the Lions just ran out of defensive options. And unfortunately the kick was not successful from Crowley, so that put Munster out to 28 points to 6 just after half time. They were going to be a hard team to catch from here. I've been pretty impressed with Nohumba at number 10 for the Lions in the last couple of weeks. He looks dangerous when he gets the ball, and in the 54th minute of the game he finally made it into a break for the Lions, and they took off downfield. Unfortunately, due to the Munster defence, it didn't come to anything good at that stage, but it was a good break from him, and he looked dangerous every time he got the ball in open play. So in the 61st minute of the game, the Lions got on attack. They put a couple of mauls together, and finally Botha went over for them, scoring a good try. The conversion was successful, and we had the score back to 28 points to 13 at that point of the game. So there was 20 minutes left in the game, and it was going to be a question of whether the Lions could really get back into this and put some pressure on Munster to score the points they needed to do. 28-13, they were still down by more than 2 tries, and they started throwing everything at Munster. But this is where the Munster defence and also their experience stood up. And the biggest difference I've seen this weekend between Munster and Leinster as examples is that Leinster inexperienced team, that B team or C team as some people are calling it, just doesn't have the experience to deal with game management like we're seeing from this Munster team. They decided to go to South Africa. They wanted to win both of their games in South Africa this year, and they put a clinical defensive pressure on the Lions for the next 10 minutes of this game to make sure the Lions weren't going to get back into the game. It was a very, very good set of play from the Munster team. However, the Lions weren't done, and in the 75th minute they went very close to scoring a try. The TMO got involved in this one. It seemed to be a double movement as they went over the line, so there was no try awarded to the Lions. That would have got them a little bit closer in this game, and that was basically their last hurrah. So then we went into the last 90 seconds of the game, and it was obvious Munster wanted to get a bonus point try for the win in this game. They got closer and closer to the Lions goal line, and it was that man Gavin Coombs that ended up going over for Munster to score that bonus point try in the 79th minute of the game. A well-deserved try from Munster. They were very good in this game, I thought, very technically superior, and they were executing their skills both in offense and defense throughout the entire game. The try was unconverted on the Munster side, so the final score in this game was 33 points to 13, and Munster capped off a very successful tour to South Africa in this year's 2024 United Rugby Championship. I thought this was a stellar rugby performance from Munster. It was a very intelligent team who were executing their strategy very well. As I said, it's a difficult place to go and play rugby, Joburg, at altitude, and you can run out of energy very, very quickly. But it looked like the Lions at the end that were running out of the energy as Munster started to put their pedal to the metal, particularly in the second 20 minutes of that second half. They were really strong in their defence, and the Lions, while they were throwing everything at Munster, the Munster defence stood up, and you need a lot of energy to make sure your defence is working all of the time. So once again, as I've been saying, if you score 30 plus points in these games, you're probably going to end up the winner, and that was the case for Munster. What I've seen over the last couple of weeks from Munster is a team that could win this United Rugby Championship for sure. They've got some real talent in this team. They know how to score tries. Their forwards are very good, but it's their defensive work that is super impressive. So it's going to be interesting now when we get back up north for them to see how they go in the remainder of the games. And obviously they're going to be there in the playoff series as well, so watch out for this Munster team. Where do the Lions go from here? Well, tricky one. Last week they looked really good playing the game of rugby they did. This weekend they just weren't up to that same level, so it's one of those teams, I think, the Lions, that can have a good week on and then not such a good week. But they were playing against a very exceptional side in this Munster team, and the class between the two teams was very, very obvious. Now let me know in the comments what you thought of this game. If you did watch it, let me know who the players were that you thought stood out in this game. I think Jack Crowley was probably the player of the game for me on the Munster side. He controlled the game very well, and as I said, an element of his game that he continues to improve is his defensive work, and he did very, very well throughout this game. If you're a Lions supporter, let me know what you thought of this Lions performance versus their performance against Leinster last week. Do you think they played as well as they did last week, or were they missing some of those executional skill abilities that I've been talking about? I'd like to hear your views in the comments. Okay, well that's it for this review show of the game between Lions and Munster, played in Joburg yesterday. It was an entertaining game. Munster, I thought, were well ahead as far as thinking out the game and executing their plan. They went to Joburg with a plan, they executed the plan terrifically, and they deserved the 33-13 win they got over the Lions. Now, if you haven't checked out my other videos from this weekend, go and do that now. And don't forget, if you like my content, hit the subscribe button and give this video a bit of a thumbs up. I'll be back with more rugby content soon from across the world. Until then, stay well, stay safe, everybody. And it's time to say adios from beautiful Mexico. Bye for now.